You should have a worksheet that looks like this, and I'm going to go through the notes relatively quickly, but you should be able to pause the video and fill them in as we go. So first, let's just kind of highlight what this first section is about, which is exponents. So you should do something here in the top to make the title stand out. Okay, I just kind of colored it in a little bit. Okay, and in this first box right under the title, it tells us a little bit about what exponents are used for. So when we first learned how to multiply, we learned that multiplication was actually something that we already knew. It was just addition repeated. So if you, say, had like 2 times 5, you could get that answer by taking 2 and adding it 5 times, or you could just do 5 times 2, which is what multiplication was, repeated addition. When we use exponents, that's actually repeated multiplication. So we take the same number and we continue to multiply it by itself a certain number of times. So over here on the right, let's go through the parts of an exponent, of a power really. So if we look over here on the right, when we have something raised to a power where it has an exponent, the exponent is written as a superscript, like up a little bit higher and up high. The number or variable that is on the bottom is called the base. And the base and the exponent together make a power. So this whole thing together is a power, where this part of the power is called the exponent, and the number or variable that is raised to the exponent is the base. Over here on the left, they have given us some examples of what an exponent means. So if we look over here on the left, they tell us that 4 to the 3rd power means that we're going to have our base 4, and the exponent tells us how many times that base will appear as a factor in our product. So product means we're going to multiply, so we're going to be multiplying 4, and to see how many times 4 will appear as a factor, we look here, and this tells us that 4 will appear as a factor 3 times. So 4 to the 3rd is the same as 4 times 4 times 4, which simplifies to 64. Underneath that one, they give us an example, 1 to the 5th power. That means that our base, 1, is going to be our factor, and that factor will be used 5 times in our product. So the exponent tells you the number of times the base appears in your product. So 1 to the 5th power, that's another way to say that, 1 to the 5th power, 1 raised to the 5th, is 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1. Notice that the 1, the base, appears 5 times, which is indicated by this exponent. And since they're all 1's multiplied together, that would simplify to 1. All right, so then they ask you to fill in the example with 3 squared. So that means that our base, 3, would be a factor twice. So you can fill that in if you want to pause it. So that means 3 squared would be 3 times 3, because the 3 would appear as a factor twice, and so that would be equal to 9. Now we've been using some of this terminology up top. I didn't indicate here in the top right. It says this means b multiplied by itself n times. So that's what they're explaining for this specific power here. That b will be multiplied times itself n times, which is what we saw in these examples. That like 4 was multiplied by itself 3 times, and 1 was multiplied by itself 5 times, and 3 was multiplied by itself twice. If you look in the middle here, it says when we say an exponent out loud, we call it a number with a power of 2 squared and a power of 3 cubed. We'll talk about why that is later in our class, but that's something that we've already been using, that terminology. Okay, so let's look at the bottom where they have some examples. Now don't ask me why it says 1, 2, 3, then 1, 2, 3 in the examples. I have no idea. But if we look at these examples, and actually over here to the right, we're going to skip this one. We're not going to fill this top one in. We will eventually come back and fill that in, but we're going to explore this and try to figure this out a little bit later. But for this circle, any number to the blank power is itself All right, so for that one, we're going to fill in first power. So any number to the first power is itself. And then below that, powers of 10 will only contain ones and zeros, which we'll see in the last two examples in this section. So if you want to try these 6 examples and then pause it and then come back and check your answer, you can do that. Okay, so let's look at the solutions. So 2 to the 5th means that we have our factor is going to be 2, and it's going to be repeated in our product 5 times. The main error people make when they're working with exponents is to think that this is equivalent to 2 times 5. But it's not 2 times 5. That would be addition, repeated addition. It's 2 appears as a factor 5 times, so it's multiplied 5 times. So we would have 5 twos multiplied together, so that would give us 32. 5 to the 3rd means that our base is 5, so we're going to see 5 appear as our factor, and this tells us how many times 5 will be a factor. So 5 will be a factor 3 times, so it's 5 times 5 times 5, or 125. If you accidentally got 15, that means you did 5 times 3, not 5 to the 3rd. 10 to the 3rd means that 10 is a factor 3 times in our product, so it's 10 times 10 times 10, or 1,000. 2 to the 1st, we said that any number to the first power is itself, because it only appears once. 10 to the 5th is 5 tens multiplied together, or 100,000. And 10 to the 13th is 13 tens multiplied together, or 10 million, billion, trillion, 10 trillion. Okay. Now the bottom part is the most important part for you to focus on. And that's why there's the angry beware down there. The base is only what's directly in front of the exponent. In order for a negative symbol to be used in the base, it must be grouped in the parentheses. So look at the difference between these two original expressions. Negative 2 to the 4th, and in parentheses, negative 2 to the 4th. Notice that this simplifies to negative 16, while this simplifies to positive 16. And that's because this could really be read as the opposite of 2 to the 4th. So this is saying use 2 as a factor 4 times, and it's the opposite of 2 times itself 4 times. So another way to write it is a negative outside. Then there's our repeated factors, 2 repeated as a factor 4 times. So that's equal to negative 16. Compared to this one where the negative is inside the parentheses, and so this is saying that this whole thing is the factor that's going to be repeated. So it's negative 2 repeated as a factor 4 times. So it's negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, which is positive 16. There's lots of ways for you to determine that that's positive. Either these two multiplied together give you positive 4, and these two multiplied together give you positive 4, and 4 times 4 is 16. Or a negative times a negative is a positive, but then times a negative gives it negative, and then times another negative makes it positive again. Or the one that I usually use is if there's an even number of negatives in your product, then the answer is positive. All right, so this is going to go in your notebook. In order to get it to fit in your notebook, you'll need to fold it in half and insert it in your notebook kind of sideways on the page. Okay, thanks.